Toby Gilmore came as a young person to live with the Gilmore family in Rainham, John Gilmore, and apparently grew up there. We don't know much about his young life. Grew up there, and when the American Revolution broke out, he enlisted. He became one of about 9,000 people of color to serve the American cause. About 5,000 of them saw combat. He was probably one of them. And after the war came back, slavery was over in Massachusetts in 1783. He was able to acquire a good piece of land, lived in 2 houses, I think, in the post-war period, and became one of the most respected people in Rainham. And his family, there are still survivors of his family today who look back on his service, as we do, as something to be proud of. So there was an old myth, and I think it's a myth, that he was George Washington's body servant. That's not true. He certainly didn't know Washington, but he served anyway, risked his life anyway, and was a veteran of the American Revolution. So we are very pleased to have some of his stuff here, mitre, cap, and a runlet, as well as some, archival stuff. So, and he's in that military room, prominently displayed, as he should be.
This is Toby Gilmore's original runlet, also known as a canteen, that he carried with him during the Revolutionary War. It dates to 1776, and during that time period, often due to a lack of clean drinking water sources, more often than not, it was rum rather than water stored in a soldier's canteen. This is a reproduction we had made of Toby's runlet. It was assembled by New England cooper Ron Razelis at his cooperage in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The reproduction shows us what the runlet would have looked like fresh from the cooper in 1776.
Have a reproduction of Toby Gilmore's military cap, as was described in the Providence Journal, and what we have based on the original cap that is here at the Old Colony History Museum. The question arose, well, how do you know how to make the cap? Well, mostly it's based on many other extant originals, but in reality, we merely let the cap tell its own story. For example, you see this tuft of linen thread on top. And if we look at the top of the front plate, there's remnants of thread where a tassel was originally set up. If we look at the side of the cap, we can see where the red wool on the front and the blue wool in the back were bound to the cardboard with stitching. And then a piece of linen was laid over the top, and that was stitched down to bind everything together. And perhaps one of the more intriguing elements, the band that goes around the back, we were able to use a conservation report from approximately 40 years ago to recreate the band. Fragments of cloth that were part of the cap at one time were saved, and we were able to use that to recreate the back of the cap. And we can also see how it was all bound together. And then lastly, and perhaps one of the most interesting features of this cap, is the fact that it has this piece on the front, this piece of blue wool bound in a piece of linen tape with cross-stitch embroidery across the front, Federalism and Liberty. Well, this isn't the most revolutionary sentiment from Liberty and Union Taunton, but it fits in very nicely with what we know about the early years of the Republic. And it also is very different. The stitching is slightly different. It was done by a different hand, by a different person. Perhaps Toby's wife, Roxana, who also did the cross-stitch embroidery, which was very commonly used in samplers and more commonly in laundry marking. So she would have been very adept at that kind of practice. Whereas most military caps that had any sort of embroidery, such as one of the officers' caps down at the Rhode Island Historical Society, all that would have been done in silk thread embroidery, not in cross-stitch, but in more formal embroidery style. So we have something here that tells a very unique story about a very unique soldier from Taunton, Raynham, and is unique in that it is the only known surviving example of an American, or especially a Massachusetts, Revolutionary War soldier's cap.